Welcome to Percussion Perspectives, a podcast by Henrik Larsen and Håkon Steine. Each episode of Percussion Perspectives features one or more musical artists in conversation about musical education, practice, and aesthetic and sociological perspectives. Hello, I'm Henrik Larsen, and in this episode I meet with American percussionist Jennifer Torrence living in Oslo. We talk about how to work with composers in a more close collaboration and different approaches to how to create music in new ways. Hello, Jennifer Torrence. Great you could be here in the podcast. So let me start asking you a more general question. So is there a connecting thread or a leitmotif that runs throughout your practice of percussion?
Yes, the first response would be that the social aspect of what we do and being in contact with other people, having a kind of communion around music being the space for our communion is very important. And I think that's what led me to collaborating a lot with composers and wanting to collaborate more deeply and to spend more time with composers and looking for ways to come closer than the email exchange, like when the PDF arrives in your email. But even before that, when I was first studying Xenakis or Stockhausen's pieces and wanting to know those people, even though I felt anyway that when I play a piece by George Lewis, I feel I'm truly spending hundreds of hours with this human being, even if I only know him very briefly. He didn't write the piece for me. And here I'm thinking of North Star Boogaloo. But just to think of that act as getting to know a person, reading their biographies, reading their texts, I would say this would be the thread going through all the work, whether I'm playing the classic pieces or making new works. Yeah.
So a personal connection to the composer, you could say. Yeah.
And also you and people that I've worked with. It's something about the, like sharing meals, like when we played our duo project and spending time with your wife and all of these things. Is like the music is the table around which we break bread.
Yeah, and it makes sense also that it's not only playing for an audience, but it's also a community of researching the music and creating new ideas. Can you describe a little more in detail your method of working with composers the recent years? I know you have been developing a kind of method or principles for how you do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've collaborated in different ways, some more conventional ways where you ask the composer for the piece and then it arrives as a score and then you go and learn it and then show it to the composer when you're done. I've also worked more workshopping sketches, workshopping new ideas, lots of times where, and every percussionist knows this, where the composer is just like overwhelmed by our battery of sounds and you have to kind of walk through what every instrument can and can't do.
Yeah.
And then I've recently been asking composers to what I call devise. It comes from theater and devise theater, which is basically to go into a space where you have a more flat structure. It's not totally flat, but more flat than the typical relationship between performer and composer. And we develop the piece in real time. So this involves a lot of improvisation. It involves basically the piece is made as we go. And very often there is no score because it's a kind of like, do this, do that, and I remember, and it's action-based. And this also has led me to, I guess, making work that is more improvisatory in its nature, and finding more pleasure in that kind of composed piece. But that was especially during my PhD because we had a lot of time, 3 or 4 years, and I can say, let's work on this for 2 years, and it's actually possible. But now that I'm out of my PhD, I feel that I go back to the old way in a certain sense. And it's also because of COVID. I just commissioned a couple of video pieces thinking, can we make this over Zoom? Can we make this in some way? And I honestly don't think we succeeded. Partly because when the piece is finished, it's this fixed thing. And my relationship to the piece normally would be that I go and perform it and I keep it alive. And my body is the score.
Yeah.
Now it's just you press play and I almost don't even remember doing it. And then it's weird. But I have a collaboration with Øyvind Torvin now, which is really interesting because he just sent me sketches, and then the sketches are more like memory things. If I remember it, then I can play those sketches. Otherwise, I can build off of it or do something else. And we have kind of agreements. So he sends me materials, but then I kind of pick and choose, and then we speak over Zoom, and he says yes, no, this sort of thing. And that, I guess, is a kind of middle ground. We can't be in the same space, but we can still improvise. Let the body be the score. Yeah.
And just to go a little bit back, so how did you start improvising in this manner? Was it part of your education, or did you meet at some point, or was it just something you were doing because you could?
I was never taught to improvise. I wish I was. I was always a student who wanted to do everything as perfectly as possible and was most comfortable if all the directions were given. But in the process of making work or asking for pieces, it's just been something that has come back again and again and again. And it's been a very organic consequence of being in the same room with another person. It started more like a choreographer, dancer. Choreographer says, move your body like this, and then the dancer does, but it's still their body. So it's not exactly what the choreographer said. And if the choreographer had written it down, it would be a little bit different than the person's body. But there's something that happens when the notation goes away that opens up for this. And now I feel completely comfortable. But it took maybe 4 years to feel like improvisation is actually a space where I can be creative.
So it's actually come in your mature days, so to speak.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So would it have been different if you were taught it?
I'm sure it would be different, partly because how I understand improvisation now is that the musician has these sounds and gestures and ideas that are just circulating again and again and again and again. And everything has this history. So that how I've come into it is I come into it through somebody else's material, like Øyvind Torvin. I have his material and then I improvise on it. But I don't have the same historical, not heaviness, but just the history of those choices in the same way. So it's been really free for me. And now when I start to improvise from nothing, I can feel this history, I think, is the way of thinking about it. So maybe if I had been taught, I would have come into those situations with composers with a different kind of freedom, or not freedom. I actually think I was more free because I was so green.
Yeah. You can get the feeling sometimes, even with jazz musicians, that they are not improvising because they are taught how it should all fit together, and it seems like they are doing the same thing as they have done before, so to speak. So you could, if you dare, you could argue that you're improvising more than they are doing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Okay, was there ever a significant break or change in your career?
The biggest break or significant change in my career happened when I quit working in the Arctic Philharmonic in northern Norway, where I was principal percussionist. And I had a very interesting role there. It's a very diverse program, but it's still an orchestra job. So when I quit it, it was a great decision for me, because then I was able to spend weeks and weeks and weeks with certain composers and make our little pieces. I mean, it's just so wonderful. No regrets. That was a very big decision, though.
Yeah, of course. It's your income you're taking away and see what you can put instead.
Totally, yeah.
But brave to do.
It's income, it's predictability, it's structure. But also those things were maybe the predictability and the structure. Those are the things I struggled with.
Yeah. Could you mention some of your most significant influences, like musical influences or personal influences or other things?
I can speak about people who inspire me. It's so tricky because I feel with classically trained percussionists, the idea of being an artist in your own right is quite rare. And it's just something that I start to feel now, as after this PhD, after making a lot of work, where I start to understand what I'm doing. I can't say I fully understand it yet, but things that inspire me, at least. One is a percussionist named Mathias Schack Arnott, who's actually half Danish, and he works
I know him.
Australia. He used to be part of Speak Percussion. Now he's making installations and incredible solo pieces where you have this feeling that he doesn't have any limits. He's not intimidated by any kind of logistical limitation. So one project he did, he made a table that's definitely bigger than arm's width that would spin in a circle extremely fast. And he just lays materials on the table. And as it spins, he can just put mallets down and suddenly it's going like, or he can put a cymbal down and it will start to eventually sing as it rubs against the table, as the table rubs against it. And he has another project where he filled the room with different kinds of hanging instruments and chimes. And I don't know how, but they all spin around him. So it's like the table, but he's the one standing still. And then the whole room is moving on. It's just amazing. And I would like to move towards work that is less compact, less suitcase oriented, more like dream. I love the dream state that you feel like he must have been in when this came to mind, because it's just on the edge of what's possible. But I really am very influenced by certain dance practices and choreographers. I love this conceptual dance like Xavier Leroy and Jérôme Bell. Pieces where the performers, they are dancers or maybe they're amateurs. There's something about this space that they find between the body on stage with very little scenography or none. It's just a body on a stage doing simple tasks. It's hard to describe. You just have to see the work if you haven't. But on the opposite side of this Mathias Schack Arnott dream state, huge explosion, I love work like these choreographers that it's minimal materials and it's just like the human being. There's a piece of Véronique Doisneau, which was Jérôme Bell, and a ballerina who is about to retire in real life from the National Ballet. And the whole time she's just talking about which pieces she liked to dance and which ones she didn't like to dance. And she does some little excerpts, and it's the humanity in it, I think, is what I'm drawn to. An answer.
A nice answer. It's in two directions, right?
Yeah.
So the very close and personal, and then something that is breaking limits and starting the dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. I discuss sometimes with my colleagues these days that at which time did we start to see ourselves as artists, if ever? Which is, I mean, if you were an artist in other fields, you might have the feeling of being an artist much more early.
Yeah.
But it seems like, and we talk a lot about this reproduction that we're doing.
Yeah.
So somehow, right now we're working on pedagogical projects where we try to make the students realize that they shouldn't find the true answer, but they have to find many answers,
Yes.
different exercises to start that process more early in the development.
How do you what's an example?
A very simple example is just to interpret the same phrase or the same piece in two significantly different ways and present the two versions as truly as you can feel both of them. And then start to discuss the choices behind them, because then it's not drawing towards one solution, then it's drawing towards many solutions, which I think might open the space a little bit more early in the career.
Absolutely. It's similar. I think we even talked about it, but that I've recently become interested in not planning so much, especially in chamber music, where you decide tempo, you decide articulation, phrasing, and you rehearse it and you drill it, so that when you come to the concert is just a test for if you can deliver on those agreements. But we all know that the concert brings new situations, mostly acoustic ones, but then also nerves. And that can we allow to not plan all of those things, and you just rehearse many different tempi and many different phrasings, and then when you get there, open your ears and see what happens.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We're working also, a part of the project is to try to interpret it in a more free way, and then in the rehearsals we don't do the same thing. We always do a new thing, and we don't start, for instance, making the synchronization work.
Right.
it has to be a totally different focus, and it's really, really interesting. It's such nice rehearsals because we are so relaxed and we're just all the time finding new ideas and new approaches. Yes. So yeah, it's not finding one solution that you need to stick to, but it's just opening up for more solutions all the time.
Yes.
So I'm quite we're not so long in the process, but I'm quite curious what will happen in the concert situation with this kind of approach.
Yes. And Steve Schick has a phrasing of it for himself, which is that the concert situation is a weather pattern.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I used that last week.
Yeah. And it's really like, I think until recently I was like, yeah, it's a weather pattern. Sometimes it's like hailing.
Yeah.
But to be less like that and more like, when I moved to Norway, there was this pier that went out to the ocean in northern Norway, and all these Norwegians were like, you just have to go to the pier when the wind is in your face and feel alive. Yeah. And I just understand this. But now I've lived here for 9 years, so I start to understand that you can enjoy the hail in the face. And that now I'm trying to say, okay, but can I enjoy that in the concert situation? Is there something interesting there when it really feels like almost dangerous, actually?
As a direct result of the digitalization of all parts of music creation and musical performance, it will more and more be possible to guarantee the artistic quality of a piece of music and abandon the often nervous situation of the urpremiere. With artificial intelligence composition, all traces of unprofessionality could easily be eradicated.
As we all know, at some level, technology poses a potential threat to the existence of the musicians, as we gradually more and more clearly see more and more examples of technology taking the role of musician, sometimes without traces of traditional human expressivity. More and more robots and robotics and biotics are surpassing the levels of human performance levels, first in terms of speeds and loudness, but now more and more also in musicality.
Hurrah, hurrah, the robots, and all so exciting robots.
Yeah, hurrah, hurrah, artificial intelligence. Hurrah.
At some level, technology poses a potential threat to the existence of the musician as we gradually more and more clearly see more and more examples of technology taking.
So what would you not have missed?
There's very little I would have done without, I think. I think the main thing I would not have missed is the overwhelming gender imbalance in our field and the misogyny that I carried in myself for a very long time because of it. I would not have missed that. Yeah.
So that's a driving factor for you, maybe?
For sure. Now I'm making many decisions thinking about creating a world which is my community of people that I have around me and that I get to be a part of their life, making that a world I can tolerate. Mm-hmm. And I think for too long, I was only around men, definitely only white people. It's not tolerable anymore. So it does drive many decisions.
Yeah, it's true. Our contemporary music world is definitely much driven by white people, at least, and also a lot of by men.
Yeah. So
what would you like to undo?
I would like to undo the systems of racism and misogyny that shape our consciousness. That's a big project, and I have a lot of work to do in myself. And then in terms of something even closer to the instrument, I would like to undo my wish for control. And it's also in my personal life, how I make decisions, absolutely professional and personal life. I would like to undo my wish to master things, to control things. And my project now, my research project is called Performing Precarity. And this is one of the layers in the project, which is in contemporary music, to what extent are we still mastering our instrument the way we did when we learned percussion or whatever instrument you play? And to what extent are pieces still asking for that? Because so many pieces are asking for all kinds of stuff, new instruments, theatrical things that you alluded to before, playing with technologies and things that you just don't study them. It's really learning on the fly, and it's something around amateurism and expertise, but there's also this thing around that it seems we're not as interested in mastering and perfecting, also because they're not really able to. But, when we're speaking on stage or singing or whatever, it's just never going to be like a professional who does that. So then I start to think, now, could I go further? Can I go all the way and not be an amateur at everything, but to just be conscious that mastery was always impossible. It will always be impossible. And just to kind of loosen that and have more fun and play. Like what you're talking about with your students, when they pick one interpretation of a piece and then they try to master it, all the doors that shut when they stop playing.
Yeah.
It's this thing. I would like to undo it.
That's really, really interesting. And I think this general wish for control is incredible in our world as percussionists. I mean, we have so many instruments to master, and we have so many traditions coming at the same time in our studies. We have the whole orchestral tradition. We have all the contemporary music with really hardcore pieces we need to spend a lot of time on, and we could go back playing Bach on the marimba, and then we need to master the whole music history. So it's incredibly easy to get to a point where you have more things to master than is actually possible for a human being.
And isn't it more about the returning to Bach or returning to snare drum, returning to any practice? It's in that returning that if you've mastered it, then it's closed. There's nothing left except for your own celebration of your control. But I know I will never master the snare drum, so I return to it, and it's always teaching me things.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's a nice laboratory, these things where you can really feel the smallest details, and you realize how you can develop and how your mind develops in that process.
Yes.
But that's also another perspective than being told that now you have to master this.
Yes.
And then this, and so, it's a totally different perspective. So that leads to the next question. What makes you happy?
I think happiness is a very elusive state. Many things bring me joy. I feel joy all the time. Playing music, listening to music, eating food, drinking wine, walking outside, seeing Norway just out of my window, talking to my family. Many of these things bring me joy. But happiness, this feels in my mind like a more permanent, not permanent, but a bigger state than those joyful flashes. I had a period in October 2020 that lasted 3 months where I honestly can say I felt happy. And it had to do with this feeling of flow that I had, which was a feeling of effortlessness and generosity. It was so easy to have this kind of generosity that was also towards myself as well as others. This space. And I don't think I really felt this before, actually. So that's why my happiness thing is a little bit different, because that felt so, it was like new level of self-understanding and happiness. But now I feel more like I'm in a period of winter in Norway. It's little splashes of joy every day.
Yeah, of course. And maybe, I mean, happiness is not a long-term relationship, but it's very interesting that it's the effortless that makes you there. The fights that has become less fight and more flow, maybe.
It's flow, totally. Yeah. At least that's what it feels like. What made me that way, I don't know. A million small gears just clicked.
Yeah. Okay, what is your next project?
My very next project is tomorrow. I will record with Sigrun Gomnes, who's a member of Pinquins, a piece by Alvin Singleton, who's an American composer, a Black composer. And the piece is called Extension of a Dream, and it's from 1977. Old school, wood blocks, cowbells, tom-toms, all the old sounds. But it's a very interesting piece because it has this sort of Varesian mass. Like he's in a certain sound mass, and then it stops, and then there's a new sound mass. And with these old sounds, kind of orchestral precision, it's very nice. And then after this, I have video projects in an organization called No I Banda, which is in Montreal. And I've made 3 video works of varying styles, each 10 minutes long. One is with composer Carolyn Chen, another is with Marina Puliokina. I'm sure I said that wrong. And then my friend Anna Marta Sørlien Holden, who's also in Pinquins. So it's 3 collaborative pieces, and they'll be shown at the end of the month.
You're not falling asleep during the COVID crisis?
Not at all. I've been really back to the joy, very happily occupied with different things. I've also been writing some research texts. So one is about COVID and how it's revealed our entanglement. Yes, we all understand that, and our vulnerability. Yes. But then when I think about pieces where you touch each other on stage, like we played this slapping piece, the vice versa, these kinds of pieces are impossible now. And even before COVID, I understood that that was a kind of transgressive or dangerous piece. But now after COVID or during COVID, you get this new layer of the risk in those kinds of pieces. So I try to reflect on that a little bit, just keeping on.
I was supervising a project for a composer last year, just during the crisis. And his work was playing through vibrating transducers that the audience should touch. So they would get part of the music from the vibrations and not from sound.
Yeah, nice.
But imagine an audience walking around and touching the same surfaces. It was the worst project you could make in this time.
Actually, those were pieces exactly like that I wanted to do in this research project, Performing Precarity. And I was even thinking of Jeppe Ernst's music, where they're touching each other's skin. And then he made a piece for this alphabet for the blind. I'm just a braille alphabet. And the person is supposed to rub their hand down the paper. And then it's like musical rhythms when they rub it down. And we had organized that we would display these pieces. It's just like not possible.
And what do you think is the future of percussion in this world that is maybe more aware of what it means to connect to each other?
I really believe that pieces like the one you just described, that are physical, pieces where there's a sense of intimacy with other human beings, will be even more important. I think before COVID, they had a kind of gimmicky, touchy-feely, new agey vibe. But now I think we understand that they were getting at something very essential and needed and human. I don't know. That's just a detail. I think that's something that will happen. But for the whole field, it's a good question. What are your predictions?
Well, in Denmark, there's a lot of attention towards culture from the general audience, but not so much from the politicians. So it's a kind of weird major crisis for the sustainability of the arts, and at the same time more people than ever realizes that it's important. So in general, so it's really hard to predict how the future will be, if there will be better times for the art or worse times. It's really hard to say. And also the things that connect people, like singing together and being together in a way where you can see that more people are on the screen, kind of is very important at the moment, but it's hard to say how that would be in the future. Because that's the feeling we have right now. This is the need we have right now to experience.
I hope in my own life, I hope that when I get to travel again, I will travel a little slower, take an extra day. These places and get in touch. Just get in touch.